This Choircast podcast episode is brought to you by Wild Olive, where we host game-changing conversation about literature, culture, and the Bible. I'm Jennifer Bird, a biblical scholar.
And I'm Jean Patrol, a literature scholar. If you want to change your Bible reading game, you can try reading the Bible as literature.
The way writers such as Emily Dickinson, Octavia Butler, Ursula Le Guin, James Baldwin, or Tony Kushner do.
Every other week, we let modern writers give a fresh take on a familiar Bible story.
Tune in to Wild Olive wherever you get your podcasts.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Well, hi, friends. Welcome back to the podcast of This Is Not Church. Because if it was church, then as Nat would say, you would have left by now and I would have been following you out with a plate of cookies, which he says every time. And it's not that I make that many cookies. I think he just runs out of things to say, which is surprising because he always has so much to say. Nat is not here with us today. He's dealing with a flat tire, but I am here with John. You want to say hi, John?
Hi, John.
And I am Bethany. We're really glad to have another wonderful guest, as we always get to have some of the best people that we get to interview. And so today's guest is Phyllis Mathis. She is the author of The Subversive Soul. It is a book about the gentle revolution everyone needs. And throughout her long career as a therapist, spiritual companion, and life coach, her aim has always been to move beyond repair and self-improvement toward a life of wholeness and flow. She loves learning and teaching, spontaneity and collaboration. She loves conversation and the way it forms us into the better versions of ourselves. She enjoys art and music and humor and play. She enjoys riding her bike and spending time with friends. And most of all, she loves how the soul is always at work within us, gently inviting us into wholeness. What a beautiful description of who you are. Welcome to the show, Phyllis. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions we always ask our guests is just to share a bit about who they are, and maybe even a little bit about your faith journey, like where you got from to who you are today.
Okay. Well, it's a long trip because I'm kind of old, but we live in Colorado in a suburb of Denver, which we love. We love living here. I'm married. I have 2 adult children and 4 grandchildren. My faith journey started back in the Jesus movement of the 1970s, and just loved being a Jesus person for the longest time. And from there, we kind of moved into the charismatic wing of the evangelical church, and we were in various iterations of charismatic experience, I should say, in and out of things. We finally landed in the Vineyard Church, if you know what that is. But along the way, I always found myself in some sort of leadership. And I loved what you said on the podcast I listened to today, Bethany, when you said you really didn't experience a lot of discrimination as a woman leader in the church because you always played along and you never really believed women should be leading anyway. You just sort of found yourself in my story too. And but I ended up leading Bible studies, leading prayer ministries, I was an elder in an evangelical church for a while. We were part of Campus Crusade in college, and then we were part of all kinds of crazy little Pentecostal churches. And we ended up at a really big church in Minnesota where I was on the elder board, and I was one of the first women on the elder board at that church. So I kind of just found myself leading, and then I was speaking some. And when we moved from Minnesota to Denver, we found this little vineyard church that we loved and became really good friends with the pastor and his wife. And of course, we were on the core leadership team and all of that, but it was a fun little community. But it wasn't terribly viable after a while because everybody was moving to larger churches. And we were still pretty small and pretty homegrown. And so we couldn't really afford to support the pastor and his family, and they moved away, and we had to decide, what are we going to do now? Do we want to hire a pastor? What do we want to do? And I had been doing some speaking at the church, so I just volunteered, hey, I'll do the message. And my husband's pretty good at administration. He was also the worship leader. So between the two of us, we held this group together for about a year while we looked for a pastor. And that kind of ushered us into a whole other experience that ended up being our last experience in church. And then meanwhile, working as a psychotherapist, I was working mostly with Christian people. And so then before we called it religious trauma, we called it spiritual abuse. And I worked with a lot of spiritual abuse and heard a lot of really bad stories. And was becoming disillusioned. And it took a lot to disillusion me because I was a true believer and kind of a naive gal. So over the years, it just started crashing in on me. And as I was growing, I guess, spiritually, I had this belief that if you're really growing in a spiritual way, you're kind of outgrowing the systems that were holding you, and then the natural movement of growth is kind of beyond the structures to, something larger. And often we find ourselves without a faith home or without a church or without a religion. So all those things came together, and I got depressed and sad, and my own, I called it a spiritual crisis at the time. And it was before we used the word deconstruction as a really nice way to just kind of lump everybody's experience into, this is a crisis of faith or belief or community. And so finally left the church and wandered around, but it was a pretty dark time in my life because I was such a devoted believer that all my identity and all my giftedness and all my beliefs were just tied to this faith system. So when it crashed, then I didn't know who I was, didn't know what to think, didn't know what to believe. And so it was a hard journey, as a lot of folks who I'm sure listen to this podcast can relate to. So then I just sat around in the dark for a while. And I started to wonder, what do I do now? Who am I now? And I started to kind of find my way through the dark. And so my book ended up being some of the things that I learned about my soul that no one ever taught me in the 35 years I spent in the church. And I kind of learned them, I identified them in retrospect. Like once you make it through the darkness, you kind of go, whew, what was that about? And I kind of pieced together some of the, those little breadcrumbs along the way and started teaching about it and started and eventually wrote about it and incorporated it into my counseling practice and started helping people who were in similar situations, faith or not, listen to some of the stirrings of the soul and start to move in the direction and the guidance of our inner soul and help them kind of walk into a life that works better for them and for me. I mean, not because of them, but for all of us. I think we're listening to our soul and we're walking in that direction. It has this natural ability to kind of move all parts together into the same direction. So that's a long story. That's how I got here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's shockingly how similar it is to. I'm not going to speak for Bethany, but I can speak for my brother and myself. We were children of the 70s, so we were children of the Jesus movement. My parents were very active in the Jesus movement, and then followed almost point by point what you just said, how you went from that to a more of a charismatic church. We ended up in a faith center church, which is kind of charismatic light or Pentecostal light, you might call it.
Okay.
Foursquare, yeah.
Oh, Foursquare.
Yeah, Foursquare. Yeah, Foursquare. Sorry. This isn't a question about the book yet, but I mean, why do you think so many people follow these steps? Because we've had this conversation with so many people, especially that came out of the Jesus movement, that followed that Jesus movement into a charismatic church, and then followed that into, more Pentecostal churches, and then, then started questioning. Do you see any connection between that path?
Well, I would guess that we're hungry, and we're hungry for more, and we're hungry for what's truly spiritual. And so then a lot of times what the charismatic wing was offering, at least me, was this sort of magical, yes, God is here, more imminent than we think, and miracles can still happen, and we can learn about how to do that. And so I think it comes from a sincere desire for more and bigger views of God. But, we don't really know what we're doing. So we organize around these shiny objects, gifts of the Spirit, or better worship, or more extravagant experiences. And then those are just not sustainable. And they end up just, usually crashing and burning.
Yeah. I mean, I that's, I left the church a long time ago. And so again, I relate with you with not having a word for it, because there was nothing that the word deconstruction wasn't being used specifically in that way yet. So, we had, you're losing the faith, you're a crisis of faith, you're on a slippery slope, all that kind of stuff.
You're in the dark night of the soul or something.
Yeah.
Lukewarm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like some of my friends told me, basically, you probably never were a real Christian.
Oh, there's that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your story how you grew out of the structures and into something larger. And I was curious what that larger looks like for you at this season of your life. And it sounds like you kind of answered it in some degree with, like, even writing this book was your own experience of what larger looks like, just to even make sense of it all. But is there anything that I know that our listeners are always looking for spiritual practices or spaces where they can really connect with the divine and with themselves and outside of those normal structures. So have you found anything like that connects with your soul?
Short answer is no. And one of the chapters in the book is I talk about breaking up with knowing, and my need to know, have it nailed down. And it was one of the personal learnings that I needed to learn, was to let go of certainty and the need to know, like the craving to know. And so I needed to just kind of settle out and give myself permission not to know. And that doesn't mean I don't believe anything, but I don't have a system that explains the beliefs that much. I'm influenced by contemplative Christian folks. I'm also influenced by Buddhists, but I refuse to align with an ism, I guess, because I'm so prone to just join with a faith, a system, or an ideology. So I know that leaves people in the lurch, but one of my beliefs is that not knowing or developing a relationship with not knowing is one of the skills we maybe need to learn as we go into this larger thing. And so it's hard. It's hard not to know, or to feel like you belong somewhere or are attached to something. But so for me personally, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, if there really is a God, this is a dumb system. Like, humanity is really dumb right now. And sometimes I just think, of course there's a higher being. Of course there's a higher power. Look at the beauty and the miraculous all around us. So yeah, I haven't really landed. And I'm kind of just trying to enjoy the weightlessness of it.
Within that space, are you finding spaces that care for your own soul? I know the whole book is about this relationship with the soul, but what does soul care look like in your own life?
Well, I would say one of the tools that it really helped me, it kind of saved my career as a therapist back in 2010, was I learned about the practice of mindfulness and mindful meditation and neuroscience and things like that. So it really did kind of help me learn how to, as much as I could, let go of my need to judge everything and develop the skill of being present in the present moment, or present in my body, or listening to things that aren't necessarily my monkey mind. And so those kinds of practices really help me. A quiet, meditative place. Nature really helps me. I think that my connection to the divine is most potently felt when I'm in the forest or next to a stream or something. And it's very palpable, it's embodied, and I feel that same kind of spiritual thing that we feel sometimes, or we used to feel anyway, when we were feeling connected to God. So they're small, more human or more embodied kinds of things, but that is how I practice taking care of myself and trying to come back to myself.
Yeah, going back to what you said earlier about not knowing, that's something that I've worked really hard on. And because being raised in the church, it was always about certainty, knowing where you're going after you die, knowing where you stand with God right now. And then there was a point where I embraced the idea of uncertainty, and embrace the idea of being able to say, I don't know. And I find that it's like a really important response to a lot of things, especially as I'm trying to figure out, like you're trying to figure out, is there even a divine? Is there a God? Does God exist or not? I mean, going from day to day, there's days where I'm like, yep, God exists. There is a God. There is something divine happening. Then there are days I'm like, no. If this is the world that God created, there is no God. So how do you
Sunday?
Okay,
I was going to say last Sunday I preached a sermon on does God exist? It was not a fun sermon. It turned out fine, but it's such it goes against me to have to even ask that question, because it just feels so black and white, and it's just not. It's just not. I mean, at least it isn't for me. But anyway, go ahead, John.
I was just going to ask how do you juxtapose those two positions at the same time?
Well, one of the things I'm trying to learn to do is hold two positions that are opposite at the same time. Just practice doing it without having to figure it out. But the second thing I want to say is that if God is really as good as we always said God was, then God needs to be a whole lot bigger than that. And God needs to be bigger than our ideas about God, or our beliefs about God, or our knowings about God. And so it makes sense to me that there could be a God, but we may not be able to understand God, or even in some ways tangibly connect to God the way we used to, because of course God has always been bigger than that, and in ways that are just blow all of our circuits for understanding and connecting. So does that make sense? It kind of helps bring those two things together. Because if God is like super big, it makes sense that, well, maybe we don't really know very well how to connect with the God that really is, because we keep settling for the God that we think is.
And that's, I think, part of the problem is we settle for a smaller God, right?
Mm-hmm. More manageable. Makes more sense.
Yeah. And we feel more secure knowing, and we feel very insecure not knowing. So we don't like that.
I heard somebody say the other day that that people, like churches, end up preaching lukewarm sermons because everything is so hot around us. And I actually really appreciated that because things are coming at us so fast right now in this world that sometimes we just need a break. And maybe not even a break for but maybe a break from church for sure, but like a break from another complicated, heavy burden that's placed upon our shoulders that we have to like measure up to. And I think oftentimes the church has made God into something that's disappointed in us at every turn. And so it's just more and more of a burden that's placed on us, more guilt every week, more shame every week. And it's just, there's just so much already on us. Where do you find that sense of spiritual rest as well? Not just for your soul, but is it usually in nature? And what does mindfulness look like to you in your daily practice?
Well, mindfulness can take on a lot of forms. So sometimes it's a dedicated meditation, which I technically do, but I'm not very good at it. If we talk about meditation being the ability to empty your mind, and be it with the sacred silence or whatever, I'm not very good at arriving there. But to just sit and let my thoughts move through and try not to attach to them as they're moving through. That's about the best that I can do with a meditation. But I try to do that pretty much every day. The rest of the time, I like to do mindfulness where I'm just paying attention to where I am. So if I'm going for a walk, then I'm looking at, what am I actually seeing? And allowing myself to actually see it. And can I identify what I'm hearing? And stopping to listen for 5 things that I actually can hear right now. And so I kind of go through my 5 senses if I find myself in a spot like that. And so I like that because it gets us out of the thinking brain and it gets us into the sensory, into our bodies and into the sensory part of the brain. And that's always good just to balance your brain out too. So that's mindfulness that I try to practice. I try not to be too religious or too serious about much of anything. Because like you said, Bethany, that we always have that thing on our shoulder asking, are you doing enough? Is that the right thing? Are you doing it the right way? And is God going to be pleased with you? And that was one of the things that I had to give up, was this sense of why am I always asking, what does God want? As if there was something more that God wanted from me. And it occurred to me one day that if God is anything like a decent parent, what God wants is for us to be ourselves and nothing else, and to be free and to be autonomous and to grow up into who we really are. And so that always went against everything that I was taught about. Well, God wants obedience, or God wants devotion, or God wants all of these other practices that we did. And I realized that what does God want was kind of almost a threat over my head. Like, I'm not pleasing God, then what's going to happen?
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way of seeing it. And it's such a good reminder, I think, for myself, just to be aware of getting back into my body and out of my head a little bit more, with being mindful of my senses and slowing down when I'm on a walk as well. It's amazing how fast my brain is moving ahead of my body sometimes, and they're not in alignment with each other. So I appreciate that. One of the chapters that you wrote on was about your relationship to your body itself. And I think that will resonate with a lot of readers and a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast right now, because I think a lot of people in the United States struggle with body dysmorphia and feelings of not measuring up to whatever beautification standard there is, or the way that we are taking up space in the world. Especially as women, there's this desire to make ourselves smaller. And if our bodies aren't smaller, then even what about our voices? What about our personalities? How do we create spaces where we kind of shrink and become invisible? And what you were expressing in your book was that it was really hard for you, especially in adolescence. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that with us?
Sure. It really was one of the major things of my relationship with myself, because I always felt like I was the wrong body. And my mom always used to say she's big for her age, and I was always the tallest girl in the class. And gosh, when puberty set in, then, so did about 30 pounds, it just was just so awkward and hard. And my personality was one, even if it wasn't culturally appropriate for women to be small, I was always trying to be small. I was always trying to be invisible. And so to take up so much space, it was just so hard for me. And if you're chubby, then you get teased all the time. And so, man, it was hard. Junior high was brutal. High school was a little bit better. But then struggling with my weight around midlife was really hard too. So it was a constant struggle. And to some extent, it kind of is still. But in my work with clients, especially with women, if they would come in and say, I'm really struggling with my self-image, I was like, well, welcome to America. I would say that almost every woman in this country, I have found a few who are perfectly happy with who they are and never really struggled. But most of us have that sort of, I'm the wrong kind of person, the wrong kind of shape. I need to be thinner. I need to be prettier. My skin needs to look a certain way. My hair needs to look a certain way. I need to keep up and not be less than pretty, I guess. The imperative to be beautiful and pretty is really, really strong. That's part of the patriarchy also. Because if what we are is for men to enjoy, then, we got to be attractive. But it really does a number on our own relationship with ourselves and with our bodies. And I never thought, the other thing about that chapter is that as a Christian, I never thought that the body was anything to be honored. The body is the flesh. And so we have to mortify the flesh, or whatever that means. And so that worked for me because I didn't want to value or get to know or live inside my body. I wanted to be all spirit, all mind, And so to realize that actually my soul is embodied in my body, and my body cooperates with my soul, was a huge knowing, and a couple of interesting stories about that. So yeah, I just think it's hard. It's just a struggle that we have that I'm not sure humanity ever had that struggle before recent times, in the last few hundred years.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a man, I've struggled with some of the similar situations, but on kind of the opposite side. I'm a smaller build person. I'm not muscular. I'm not macho. I'm not any of that. And so I was easily picked on through school because of my size, because I didn't stand out as someone. I wasn't very boisterous. I was shy. So I understand that idea of like not liking yourself and having to come to some kind of understanding about the importance of you as a human being. And that's tough, and especially within the church.
Yes.
Yeah, it weighs heavy, I think, on so many people, where it's like our brains are oftentimes split, where we're thinking about how are we showing up? How are we arriving? How are people seeing me? What are they thinking about me? And it's hard to be fully present because it's oftentimes we find ourselves thinking about ourselves. And I don't think that God's like disappointed in us, like, the whole vanity thing, or like our thoughts aren't on God enough. They're on ourselves enough. And so God's probably really angry about that. I think that it's more that God's just sad sometimes that we get stuck in those loops and those cycles of thinking that are actually hurting ourselves. Because a lot of times when we think about ourselves, it's not like, wow, I'm the best. I am hitting right today. Oftentimes it's a lot of negative self-talk and self-hatred, and that self-hatred actually determines how we see other people then, and then we're judging others. And I think God's just like, don't you know how much I love you and how much I see you, and you get to see others in the same way. This is so great. But it takes a long time to get out of that. And I don't know if we ever fully arrive.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that I learned in my dark night or my spiritual crisis or whatever it was how much those thoughts were just ruling my life, and how much most of my career even was spent trying to heal myself from them. But I was just chasing myself around with my thoughts. And the title of that chapter is Leaving I Suckville. And I borrowed that phrase from Anne Lamott, who her famous saying is, "My mind is a bad neighborhood I try not to go into alone." And I was like, oh, she gets me. She gets. And so these ideas of just walking around with this heavy weight of thinking something fundamentally is wrong with me, and I can't fix it, and I can't get better no matter how hard I try. And our mind just wants to fix it all, but it becomes then a problem. And so then we have these voices that we're contending with inside of our head, and it's hard. It really is a struggle. But one of the things that I learned, and I try to practice, is that you can't leave I Suckville, because I said, yeah, sure, a bad neighborhood. I got a bad metropolis, honey. I got lots of bad neighborhoods in my mind. And so, and I just labeled it I Suckville, and all roads lead to I Suckville, it seemed like. And so one of the things I realized that I was trying to do was prove that I didn't suck so I could get out of I Suckville. And I just realized, no, these are just a bunch of thoughts that I'm having, and I can leave anytime I want. And I don't have to think anything different about myself or better about myself. I just need to quit reinforcing this idea that something's wrong with me that I need to fix. And I need to find all the different ways to fix myself or prove that I am not a bad person. Like I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and by golly, people can like me. It's like trying to fix the problem with the thing that created the problem. So that's one of my favorite chapters in the book, Leaving I Suckville.
Are you able to talk goodness into your life now more rapidly than you used to?
Yeah, well, I try to experience goodness more. So one thing that I learned from one of the Buddhist teachers out there, a Buddhist psychologist, his name is Rick Hansen. He has a practice he calls taking in the good. And so he kind of leads you through this idea of thinking of something that's beautiful, remembering an event in your life where it was just pure goodness, and focusing on that specifically, either a memory or a moment you're having like right now. So say I'm sitting by a lake or I'm looking at the mountains or something, and I'm like, oh, this is great. This is goodness. And then just taking a breath and just letting it soak all the way down through my being and holding on to it for as long as I can, which is usually about a minute, But his contention was because we're such survivalists, we don't hold on to good things because we're too busy trying to solve the problems or survive or figuring out what's wrong and fixing it. And so we need to practice just taking in the good in an experiential way. So that brings me back to goodness, where I can see it usually in nature or in my friends or in beauty or in music or in, something that just, it just touches my heart in a certain way, and I can attach to it just for a second or two, or breathe into it for a couple of seconds. And it enlarges my capacity to experience goodness and to hold on to it. And I think those are things that we need to learn how to do, is expand our capacity for goodness.
I relate to that. I relate to the idea of being able to hold on to that for moments. I follow the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. He's one of my, I would call him my mentor if I ever got a chance to meet him, but unfortunately that never happened. His idea on mindfulness is definitely something that I strive for. But I don't know if it's my church background, my religious background or what, but I have like fleeting moments where I can connect. Is it hard? It's hard for me. So I don't know, but is it hard to stay in the present?
Oh, totally hard. It's totally hard. And I used to think, well, the reason I signed up for Christianity in the first place was because I wanted it all bliss all the time. And I thought that's what they were offering me, So I was like, sure, I'll sign up for that. So I've always been one that really wants to be serene all the time, to be at peace all the time, to experience positive things all the time. And so then when I started listening to people talking about mindfulness, I just thought they must be doing that all the time. They must be living in this kind of wonderful, spacious, peaceful place all the time. And then I realized, oh, they're not either. So we kind of have to come back to the present and get in our bodies in every moment that we can. But it counts whenever we do. And the more we practice it, it's like we're stringing along these little moments, and it builds a sense of, oh, yes, there is goodness out there. Oh, yes, it is available to me. And oh, yes, I can practice presence anytime I think of it. And so I have to kind of give myself permission to not be 100% guru, you know what I mean? Or 100% peaceful or 100% mindful, and to not get mad at myself when I'm not. And just kind of just go, oh, yep, I got out of my body there for a second, or I went to Suckville, or I tried to predict the future or whatever. And I can step back and just remind myself, what is it like to be here right now, even when things are going in a way that I don't like them to go.
Have you been able to incorporate these thoughts into your own family? Were you learning most of these things after your children were grown? And then how does this impact the way that you interact with your grandchildren?
Oh, you really know how to bring it home, don't you? Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, we raised our kids in the crazy charismatic evangelical thing, and they're both in their 40s now, so they're in their own recovery, and there was a lot I wish that I knew back then, or wish I was paying attention to, so that they're not having to be in recovery right now. But so it was after they were already launched that I kind of went through my own faith crisis. And so I don't know how you are with your parents, but after you're grown up, you kind of don't want to hear their thoughts so much anymore. And if they're recovering from some of the stuff that you put them through, they deserve to find their own path. But I'm always there to have conversations with them, and we have quite a bit talked about that and what I'm learning. And they have listened to me teach, and they have. I have a podcast that I do with my friend Kathy Escobar, and they're big fans of podcasts. So
I love Kathy. Oh, that's so great. Were you part of the Refuge?
I am. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, how wonderful. I've followed her work for years.
Oh, she's fabulous. Yeah, she's my closest friend. So, so whatever influence I have with my children, they kind of get around the edges, and hopefully by me just being more present to them and more of a real person rather than, the parent. And then my grandkids, they're all in double digits now. So we try to be as present as we can with them and enjoy them as much as we can. But nobody's signing up to be taught what thinks about mindfulness.
Is the refuge still going on, or are you not really involved in a church community? It's more just a podcast that you're involved in at this point?
Well, I've been adjacent to the refuge pretty much since the beginning, because I've been friends with Kathy. And I wouldn't say I was an attender, but I would do workshops there. I would do teachings there. And I'm Kathy's friend. So I, kind of hear a lot about what the refuge has been through over the almost 20 years. And just this year, I'm joining their leadership team. So they're serve and sustain team, they call it. So the refuge has gone through quite the transformation, and they are a thriving, beautiful, homegrown, a unique community that I respect it a lot. And so, yeah, you should tune in to what they're up to these days. But their outreach is incredible, and the people that they're serving are many, and the people that they are allowing to do what they're good at is just kind of the leadership model is really impressive. And I really haven't seen it anywhere in an organization before. It's very organic and very compassionate. And I love it. So yeah, still going strong.
That's beautiful. What is the name of your podcast that you're on together?
Our podcast is called Soul Practice.
Okay.
So it's soul with a little plus sign, practice. And we started it because I was writing the Subversive Soul, and Kathy had published her book called Practicing. And so we thought it was a good combination of my stuff on the soul and her stuff on practicing. And we've been walking together every Monday morning for years and years and having these great conversations. So she thought, what if we just started a podcast and we just treated it like a conversation that we have between us? And so, yeah, soul plus practice. And the subtitle is Raw Conversations, Real Practices.
Beautiful. I'm glad that people can find you there.
We love it. We really have fun doing it. We have lots of great guests too. So,
John, do you have any other last thoughts before we close up our time together today?
I relate so much to your story. Your story is so similar to mine in just the path that you've been on through, like we talked about earlier, the Jesus movement into a charismatic movement, into just like this dark night of the soul, and then finding your way into like these soul practices and mindfulness and being present within your body. And I just really appreciate your journey. It's an amazing journey, and one that people need to hear and know that there is light. That there is a place, because a lot of us have a lot of this church trauma, church hurt that we have carried along with us as baggage, and it's nice to know that there's other people out there who are dealing with that as well. And
I will say, just as a last thought, the biggest thing that made a difference for me was the idea that my soul knows what she's doing and always has, and is indestructible. It can't be damaged, can't be wrecked. And so there is this source within that, got it handled.
That's great. Love it.
Yeah, it was so beautiful to read those parts of your book where you were so affirming of your own soul, that you were like speaking life into her as she was speaking life into you, like the symbiotic sort of, I mean, obviously we're super connected to our souls as bodies and everything, but it's still this incredible experience to read how you were defining that for yourself. And it was very inclusive. The whole thing, your whole book just feels like you've welcomed people into your living room for a conversation about life. It's very inviting. So thank you for sharing it with us, Phyllis.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's fun to be here.
Yeah. So friends, if you didn't get it already, you can pick or actually, is your book out yet?
Oh yeah, it was released on July 22nd.
July 22nd. Yes. So The Subversive Soul, The Gentle Revolution Everyone Needs by Phyllis Mathis. So you can pick up her book and find her on her podcast, Soul Plus Practice podcast. So please find her there. Thank you for joining us today, Phyllis.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.